This is What's Left America. I'm Chris Tritico.
I'm Andy Georgeson.
I'm Evan Mintz.
And I'm Chris Bell.
What's Left America is proudly produced by Left Out Media and brought to you by the generosity of our sponsors and friends, and hopefully someday friends just like you. You probably noticed that James Campbell is not here today. He's out of town. I think he went to New York. Evan Mintz is here, filling in for James. Evan is the Houston Chronicle's deputy opinion editor and member of the editorial board. He writes editorials, solicits, and edits op-eds, curates online opinion, and leads the endorsement process. He was the 2017 finalist for the Pulitzer Prize for editorial writing. Evan was also part of the editorial board team that was a finalist for the 2018 Burrell Osborne Award in editorial leadership. Evan's a licensed attorney and began at the Chronicle as a freelance writer, leaving the Harris County District Attorney's Office in 2011. And Evan graduated from the Benjamin N. Cordozo School of Law in New York City. Thanks for joining us, Evan.
Oh, my pleasure.
Good to have you here. It'll be good to have a knowing opinion today. Don't you agree,
As
Chris?
opposed to James.
As opposed to James.
Y'all are just jealous because James is smarter than you guys.
Today on the show, we're going to cover the midterm post-show wrap-up party, Bye-Bye Jeff, and a few rounds with Jim Acosta. Let's get right into the show, the midterm post-show wrap-up party. The midterms, President Trump in his post-show press conference called this a major victory, which I don't know how he said that with a straight face. In the House, the Democrats picked up
How does he say anything with a straight face?
That's true. As of today, they have 31 seats with 11 undecided. ABC this morning said they expect it to go to 40. The Democrats, as yesterday when I wrote this, 38, but today they're saying they expect it to go to 40. What do y'all think is going to happen here? Do you think Nancy Pelosi is going to end up as Speaker?
I do. She's speaking with a great deal of confidence, and I know she worked like crazy. And people need to understand a lot of the work for that is done during the election, and no one has been better at raising money than Nancy Pelosi, and those folks who are coming in will owe her a big debt of gratitude, because it doesn't just come from her PAC, but it comes from her supporters that she dictates to and tells where to send donations, and you become very grateful for it when you're running for Congress.
Nancy Pelosi is really good at what she does. I would have no problem with her continuing in her role, but I wouldn't be surprised if this new House Democratic membership wanted to go in a different direction. They're younger, they're more progressive, and they may have some different ideas about things. But the main thing, I don't want to see them have a big fight about who should be the Speaker.
And it seems funny to me that she's still in the position she's in. There's a lot of rumor monging about how, it's time for someone new. People don't like her, but there's no clear alternative to who she is. It seems like that she's the only option we've got. But from my perspective, when you have a loss like you did way back in 2010, you should get out of the way. No one's indispensable. And if you're a loser in politics, you should get out and let new people rise up. It's just another example of baby boomers trying to hold on to power at a time of rising millennials, and it just makes me sick.
I've been saying for a long time that the Democratic Party needed younger and new leadership. But as I've been watching this unfold, I wouldn't stand in the way of Nancy Pelosi being the Speaker again, but I would hope, because I think she's probably going to win it, but I hope that she will see what's happening in the country. And we just elected a whole lot of new, young people in the party. And so I hope that she sees what the country's seeing, and that when they elect new leadership, that beneath her, they bring in new, young leaders, so that they are developing a crop of new, young leadership to fill in the voids. Because she can't stay there forever.
No, she can't stay there forever, but you also have to keep in mind that I'm sure she feels to a certain degree like the rug was pulled out from under her in 2010. It was a pretty short speakership compared to a lot of others, and you can't also discount the fact that Congress and the House is built on seniority. That's how people get in power there. And she's from a very progressive district. She's very progressive. So that certainly is not going to hurt with the younger progressives, and I don't think she'll stay there forever, but I do think she would like to have another run.
Well,
I think it shows that you don't know any young people, and you say that they like her and think she's progressive. She's not particularly progressive. She's viewed as a sycophant to corporate power. If you talk to the DSA endorsed candidates, they think she's just part of the same old, that she's not willing to go out and fight for the things that people actually like. The Democratic Party has this problem where if you put its issues, its policies up for popular election, like Medicare for all or raising the minimum wage or legalizing marijuana, people like that. They vote for it. They vote for it across the country. But when you attach actual Democratic candidates to those policies, they lose. For whatever reason, people don't like Democrats, but they like Democratic ideas.
Yeah, you know what? That is something I keep hearing over and over and over and again. Like Democratic policies, don't necessarily like the candidates. Now, I think it's this is why I love having you here. And Evan and I worked together on the editorial board up until just very recently. And one of the things I like about Evan is that he reminds me that our customary way of thinking as Democrats is not the only way to think as a Democrat. There is a crop of younger people in their 30s and younger who have different ideas, and I think that it'll serve Nancy Pelosi well, her legacy, if she can manage a transition, if she can find, or work with whomever that new younger person is, and transition her way out. No one is indispensable.
I just want to interject and remind everyone, I am not a Democrat. I'm not a member of any party.
I beg your pardon. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And I did not mean to imply that you were, but you do make us think. Mm-hmm. You did make us think about other ways that Democrats think, not necessarily that you are, but you have sort of the ear.
Well, I think by having the House, Democrats have a real opportunity to just look at the policies that people actually want and then vote on them and then pass them out of the House and plop it in the Senate.
So let's talk about that, because Nancy Pelosi Saturday was interviewed and said, what are your key top priorities? And she said stabilizing the Affordable Care Act marketplace, controlling prescription drug prices, and investigating Trump's administrative actions that undermine the health care law, her top three priorities. I've heard time and time again that the House wants to investigate the Trump administration. Now, let's talk about those three things, but I also want to talk about this investigation idea. I think they have to conduct the investigations that were not conducted over the last 2 years. But if they go crazy with investigations, aren't they going to lose the American public?
Yeah, it'll be like the Kavanaugh hearing all over again,
right,
which was a complete disaster, and I think we paid a heavy price for it on Election Day. They don't handle investigations very well, and it'll look like you're just doing a repeat of what the Republicans were doing that everyone was sick and tired of. So right. I think that would be a huge mistake. As far as if they want to keep it on Russia and some of the collusion and what have you, I think Adam Schiff does a very admirable job on the Foreign Relations Committee, and I think he can handle it. And he's, acquits himself very well in that role. But if every committee over there is trying to look for something to investigate, I think it'd be a nightmare.
And I think they lose the public very quickly, and they lose the next election if they do that.
What do you base this on? I mean, it seems silly to me to call this show The Left, and you say, well, don't go after Donald Trump. The guy has done the financial equivalent of shoot someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue. You say, well, don't go investigate it. He's used his power to enrich himself and his family, and I think that no matter who you are, no one wants to see that happen in government. And as we've seen with the Republicans after 2012 investigating Benghazi again and again and again, it works well with the base, and most people just don't pay attention to that kind of thing until you get something that's an actual smoking gun.
We've got to walk and chew gum at the same time.
Right.
Mm-hmm. We need to investigate these serious issues that we have with the president, but we also need to pass legislation that is important to the people who voted this Congress in.
Yeah, like you just said. I mean, are you gonna spend all your time conducting investigations that aren't going to go anywhere? Are you going to pass meaningful legislation
go somewhere
and plop it over to the Senate and watch them do nothing?
I think it can be two things.
Yeah, let's do both.
I mean, going after Kavanaugh certainly placated the left, and you see where that left us.
If you
there
look
are
at
things to
if you look at
investigate.
polling,
But
the
wait,
Kavanaugh-
wait,
hang on.
Russia is an absolute nightmare and is a minefield for the president, and I think that they should go into
And
that.
that
the
needs to
Lord
be
knows what
investigated.
I think
that
it's
might
the other
uncover.
way around. I think that if you look at a lot of polling, people are skeptical of the Russia stuff. It plays well to a lot of the indivisible groups and the online hashtag resistance, but the things that frustrate people when they see powerful people, rich people, use their position to enrich themselves and their families at the expense of the American people. And I think that's what you see with Donald Trump and his cabinet. And I think if you investigate that, it'll be a real winning ticket for Democrats. And we've seen that already happen with members of his cabinet who've been forced to resign.
Well, it also depends on what comes up in the Russia investigation. Everything's been swept under the carpet because it's been under Republican control. But also, I think the American people are demanding some type of action, and they want to see some results. And I think what you said regarding passing legislation and putting it over in the hands of the Senate makes all the sense in the world because people are tired of gridlock. And
That's
if
right.
all they see are more investigations and nothing happening on the legislative front, they're going to get very frustrated.
And that was the point I was making. If you pass the meaningful legislation and then do the investigations that actually have meaning, in my view, then you're showing that Congress can actually do something.
Well, what doesn't have meaning? What
Well,
is it that you're thinking
I
of
don't-
as something that doesn't have
I
meaning?
don't know the answer to that.
Well, then why are we
okay,
talking about this? Why are we talking about, well, don't investigate the bad things. What are the things you don't want them to investigate?
what do you
It
want them
seems
to
like you have-
investigate?
I want them to investigate how the president is using his position to get foreign entities and domestic entities to spend money at his properties. I think that's one of the top things. I think emoluments is a serious concern.
Yeah, but
Absolutely.
you know what?
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree with
Okay,
that.
so
But-
And I actually would like the investigation that I would really like to see also is something that was blown over, and we talked about this a few weeks ago because when I saw it, is the president intervening on the moving of the FBI office, and that was just such a huge story that got completely washed over because of timing.
The Wall Street Journal also had an article on a separate topic about how the president was directly involved in paying off women to not talk about his sexual relations with them. I mean, that's something that seems like it'd be at the top of the list, too. There are a lot of opportunities there for investigations that aren't directly related to the Russia stuff, and I think Russia is covered largely by the Mueller investigation.
Well, we'll see.
Before we get too far away from it, I just want to address the Kavanaugh investigation as placating Democrats. That was a serious issue, and he needed to be questioned, and there needed to be an investigation of the charges brought by Christine Blasey Ford. I don't feel like that was a sop to
But
the Democrats.
the House doesn't have any real jurisdiction there.
No, I'm just referring to
But the way they handled
the idea
it
that
was,
this was
they
Again,
completely
I just think that
bungled
the
it.
stats show you something differently.
Yeah.
As Dave Weigel of the Washington Post has pointed out, if you look at actual polling, the Kavanaugh hearings did more to activate Democratic voters than Republican ones. Now, you can make arguments
I think
that
that's correct.
in niche races and niche areas, I mean, you shake your head and say no, but based on what?
I don't
what
think they
evidence do you
bungled it.
have? What facts
They
can you point
awoke
to?
the Republican Party, Evan, and they finally put some fire in their bellies that they did not have at that particular point in time. And yes, the polls were going to tighten, and we've talked about that a lot on the show. But that certainly was a breath of fresh air for them and gave them energy that they were completely lacking before that.
Well,
And I would believe you could point to any actual fact to back that up, some kind of statistic, some kind of polling.
Well, how about
and
the
there's
fact that
nothing there.
the polls tightened about 9 points immediately after the Kavanaugh hearing?
look. I don't.
And
I
the
don't-
fact
hang
that
on.
every
What-
senator who voted against Kavanaugh lost.
But
And,
so-
How about that?
and lost
But red
handily.
state- but
And
red
the one
state
who voted for him
That's not
won.
true. What about Tester? Tester voted against him. Tester won in Montana. Again, these stats are off.
No, McCaskill, you go down the line,
Tester voted against him.
Tennessee, I mean, every...
But Montana,
I don't
Montana's
understand
and
why-
Tester had lost with a plurality in all of his past races, and this time he actually got a majority of the vote. No libertarian intervention there, and he voted against him. So what's the difference there in these other states? I think that we're looking at this one statistic, this one little data point to try to explain a lot of stuff. There's a whole bunch of other things swirling on in politics.
Well, also, you say that, Chris Bell, like this was not important that we question.
No,
Brett
it was
Kavanaugh.
important, but it needed to be handled correctly.
Well,
and
what did
apparently
we-
they
what-
don't do
what-
that type of
what did we do-
investigation very well.
What did we do wrong? What did the Democrats do wrong?
It should
What
have
did the
been rolled
Democrats
out
on
a-
that
All right,
judicial committee do
let's-
wrong? Like we cannot not do the right thing because we might activate the base. We have to do the right thing, and for the right reason. And I don't. I don't see. I think that they were remarkably calm. The men and women on that committee that questioned him, they asked him good questions. I think for anyone who has an ounce of sense, Kavanaugh looked terrible. He looked like a liar. He looked like a person who did not have the temperament to be a judge. I think that investigation served the purpose that it was meant to serve. Where it went wrong, Andy, was where the FBI had a day or two to conduct an investigation. We cannot investigate.
The FBI got the amount of time that Senator Flake asked them for. They got the exact amount of time he asked for.
Well, okay. Flake is not a Democrat. And
Senator Flake said, I want the FBI to have a week, and they got a week.
They did not have a week.
They ended it on Wednesday.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe I don't know how. Maybe I don't know how many days a week.
But you talked about people with an ounce of sense. I mean, obviously, to people who didn't have an ounce of sense, they really like Judge Kavanaugh, and that's Trump's base. Those without an ounce of sense.
Yeah.
This is a problem that the left has. We continuously we don't want to do that because we might. The right is not having that issue. They do what they're going to do, and damn it all to hell. The left is always walking on eggshells. Maybe we're going to do this wrong. Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God! But we're not. This is not helping.
You're really onto something here, Andy. I really think you are. Although I would disagree and say it's not the left, it's the Democratic Party, and there is a difference between the two. But the Democratic Party, at its core, hates its base, and Republicans fear theirs. Republicans are afraid that they'll get primaried, they're afraid they get kicked out, and they'll do anything to placate their base. Democrats hate their base, and I think the problem is that there's no cohesive Democratic base to point to. Who is the Democratic base? Is it educated voters? Is it black women? Is it young people? Who is it? But you don't know who it is. You're supposed to, and I'm going to use the blunt word, you're pander to. It's hard.
The Democrats love their base, and it's all of those people. They're frustrated by their base because it is hard to get these people out. But we love our base.
And it's the furthest thing from being monolithic, so it's it is difficult. It's the minority communities and what have you. I think it's the lower income. I think it's a lot of higher, more highly educated people in this day and age, and so it's difficult.
The Republicans have shrunk their base to a smaller group of people that they've identified to.
Agreed.
And they tend to march much more in line.
A small group that's easy to bring out.
Easier to identify. All right, let's move on. We've gotten off topic here. Is impeachment on the list for the House?
Impeachment?
Yeah.
Doesn't sound like it.
It better not be.
Why
not?
Because if they impeach the president without having enough votes in the Senate to do anything, they're going to embolden the Republican Party.
What if it turns out the Mueller investigation is released and there are some brazen impeachable offenses in there?
That still doesn't give enough votes.
And if some Republican senators say they'll finally do the right thing.
If there's enough senators who will do the right thing, then impeachment comes on the list. But they cannot do it today. They can't. They can't do it right now. Go back to Bill Clinton. Go back to Bill Clinton.
Let's have an investigation first. Yeah. Let's see what Mueller has to say first before we say impeachment is on or off the table.
All right. I just think right now if they talk about it, they're not talking about it right now, and I think that's the right thing to do. All right. The Senate, the Republicans picked up two with three undecided. It looks like Kristen Sinema is going to win in Arizona. It's not going to be the big day the Republicans thought they were going to get. So it's not going to be as big in the Senate as it looks like Florida. I still think the Republicans are going to win in Florida, so they may only pick up the two in the Senate.
Mm-hmm.
But it certainly puts them in the Republican Party in a good position in the Senate.
Yeah, it does. It does.
How much does it change, though? What's the difference between 52 seats and 54 seats?
Not a whole lot.
It seems like the big difference is when you're coming into 2020 and looking at what the landscape is going to be for that Senate election.
Correct.
Is it going to be a toss-up for Democrats, or is it going to be a real uphill battle? And I think that with the way things are looking right now, they have a real chance of taking it in 2020. Not that we should be looking that far ahead.
The Democrats do?
Right.
If things keep moving the way they are, and I haven't looked at the Senate map for 2020 yet, to be honest with you.
Republicans are on the defensive. You got a lot of You've got a lot of plain states that are up. You've got a lot of heartland states that are up where Democrats have proven that Donald Trump may have done well in 2016, but Democrats proved that they still have what it takes there in 2018 and moving into 2020.
You've seen a lot of things change in 2 years, and if he keeps going the way he is, it's going to be a different race. And you look right here at Texas at the O'Rourke Cruz race, and I told y'all that he could take Tarrant County just by 1,000 votes, but that was huge. Texas is a changing state.
What it was the final number in Tarrant County?
I don't remember what it was, but O'Rourke took Tarrant County by 1,000 votes, and he won that county. And nobody expected, and you laughed at me when I said he could win Tarrant County. I want to hear the apology.
You're from there, right?
I did not.
I want to hear the apology. Say it.
I thought it was
say
fascinating.
Say it.
No.
Fascinating. Really?
I thought it was a more brilliant analysis.
That was a laugh of a fascinating laugh. And I said if he could take Tarrant County.
I think you said if he took Tarrant County, he would win.
I did, but
so you were wrong.
Well, winning it by 1,000 votes wasn't enough to overcome the rest of the state. But
almost
taking it by 1,000 votes shows that had he spent some time there, which nobody expected he could win Tarrant County, if he'd have spent some time there and taken it by more, he could have won the whole state. He only lost by 220,000 votes. There's a lot to be learned from this O'Rourke Cruz race, and the major lesson is that Texas can be taken by a Democrat.
Okay, so what do we do with Beto now? Here's a guy who he ran, okay, maybe he didn't spend enough time in Tarrant, but he ran a magnificent campaign, and but I wonder, so is he damaged goods?
No,
because he didn't
absolutely
take there?
not.
But I can't see it. Okay, look, he can't be the Democratic nominee for president.
I think he can be.
Okay, who thinks that?
So when Beto O'Rourke first came into the editorial board, way before the Democratic
I remember
primary
that.
even, we asked him a question we ask a lot of politicians, which is, who do you view as your political model? And he said Lloyd Benson, which is a pretty obvious answer if you're a Democrat running for Senate. But when he came in at the very end, we asked him the same question. And he said Abraham Lincoln. And I kind of rolled my eyes a little bit at the time, just thinking, well, it's a little hubris there to think about Lincoln. But there's something there that I think was a sign that if you look at Lincoln, he was a congressman who ran for Senate, who lost, and then ran for president,
and won.
And then won. And there's something to be said that. I think what the Democrats should be doing, though, is just reminding him of John Tower. John Tower was the first Republican elected to the Senate, had to run a few times before finally getting it. But if you look at John Cornyn up in 2020, running against Cornyn is different than Cruz. It might seem contrary to a lot of Democrats, but if you look at the polling, he's not as popular with Republicans as Cruz is. I don't know if he's got the energy that Cruz has to be able to run a 254-county campaign. He's not as... he doesn't have the obvious weaknesses as Cruz, but again, that's a Democratic lens on it. Republicans love Cruz. They don't love Cornyn as much.
Right. Look, Beto, you said he ran a brilliant campaign. He ran a race in Texas against Ted Cruz on impeach Trump immediately, legalization of certain drugs, abolish ICE and Medicare for all in a very conservative state, and came within 220,000 votes of beating Ted Cruz. Karl Rove said, even for people who dislike Cruz, impeaching Trump strikes many of them as terrible for the country. I've got friends and family members who may not vote for Cruz. They don't like Ted Cruz, but Beto isn't contesting Cruz for them.
Well, and I thought that was a really interesting statement that he made, and there was some truth to it, and
yeah.
I think that's something that people are going to have to hash out going forward. And I would differ with what Evan says to some degree, because I think the Tea Party loves Ted Cruz, but there are a lot of more establishment Republicans who absolutely loathe him, and you would see fundraising invitations for Beto that would have names on there that would almost drop your jaw, because they had always been involved in the Republican Party and suddenly were supporting Beto O'Rourke. He was certainly a breath of fresh air. The campaign, I thought, was incredible. I think, given the state party the finger and just running his race the way they wanted to run it was a brilliant idea. I don't think the Democratic Party can continue to be a personality cult. It's a mistake that we've been making for a long time, and this person's going to deliver us Tony Sanchez years ago, and then so and so and so and so and so and so the Sanchez brother or the
Julian
the Castro brothers.
Yeah.
And, and it just keeps going on and on. What we have to do is kind of learn from what he did and then institutionalize that and build on it.
But what he did was he did build an organization. He had an incredible organization. And when at that editorial board meeting when he first came in that time, and he wasn't quite ready for prime time at that moment, but that was okay. He had been around to a lot of small papers, meeting with editorial boards, and then he met with the Chronicle, and a lot of us left a little bit underwhelmed. My question to him is, look, there's really no Democratic infrastructure in this state, and no matter what your ideas are, there's got to be that. You've got to have an infrastructure, kind of the way Obama built one for himself without really worrying about what the Democrats do in general. And he did build that, and it showed that I think that he showed that you can do that. And that's almost more important than whether he came up with exactly the right platform.
But the estimate before that's gone around for a long time was that there were 2 million Democratic voters in the state of Texas that were registered, but that did not vote. And so that if you could get, and the gap with the Republican Party has been about 1 million votes. So if you could, or 2 million votes. So if you could get 1 million of those voters, I mean, suddenly you start closing the gap. I mean, I think the gap has been around 1 million. I have to go back and look. But to see that he closed it to 200,000 in one race is unbelievable, because the thought has always been, well, that's going to be cycle after cycle after cycle. So obviously some things, by going out and actually talking to people who hadn't been talked to before, and the number of younger voters that turned out, it's extraordinary. And so hopefully that's
he energized
he
energized people that have not been energized in a political race in Texas in a very long time. If he modified some of his talking points to energize disaffected Republicans, and I've been talking about this for months. Some of these disaffected Republicans that are looking for a home, had he modified some of these, not talked about impeaching Trump immediately, not talked about abolishing ICE, he would have brought those people over.
I think that's totally inaccurate for 2 reasons. The first one is that if you actually listen to his speeches, he doesn't really bring those things up. The second one is that those 4 points I don't think are as controversial as you're laying out. The first one about impeaching Trump, he didn't say, I'm going to do that first thing, but asked about it, he said, yeah, I think that firing the head of an FBI, investigating me as president is probably an impeachable offense. The second one was a legalization of marijuana. If you look at the UT Texas Tribune polling, that's popular. Texans want to legalize marijuana. The third one, Medicare for all. I think if people want health care, they want to know they're going to have health care. And he didn't sign on to H.R. 676, the Medicare for all plan. He specifically said that he's not going to sign on to that because the way that it is written would not cover for-profit hospitals. I think that's a pretty moderate position in the grand scheme of things.
And Andy, let's go back to something you said about the not ready for prime time, because I think in looking at the race, people need to be honest about it. I went to his opening rally here. It was phenomenal. It was at this gigantic Union Hall. It was packed to the gills. But the truth of the matter is, probably 75% of the people who were there did not even know who Beto O'Rourke was. They knew he was the guy who had just said that he was going to run for the Senate against Ted Cruz, a guy they found absolutely vile. And really going back to 2016, after Trump was elected, people have been coming out of the woodwork to try to get involved. I hosted an ACLU function at my house. Had never hosted an ACLU function before, but a lot of the people who came said they had never been to an ACLU function. They were just wanted to find some organization to cling to and get involved. And so he was certainly the beneficiary of that. But did he take advantage of it along the way and continue to energize and grow as a candidate? Absolutely. But I think we really do need to look at more of the institutional aspects of that campaign, the way they communicated, the constantly getting the message, the way they work social media. It was damn impressive.
You were just talking about when he came in the first time, right?
Yeah, I was just talking about the way he came in the first time.
Well, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right,
look, let's the
But if you
Democrats
can start
are
with
going
a
to
full haul, that's a hell of a
No,
Yeah.
we got to move on.
advantage.
We got to move on. All right, next topic is bye-bye Jeff. President Trump said he would not take any action against Jeff Sessions until after the midterm election, and he certainly kept that promise. That lasted, 12 hours after the election. He fired Jeff Sessions and replaced him with, what's that guy's name? Matthew G. Whitaker. He was the person that President Trump placed in the Attorney General's office as Sessions' chief of staff. I thought you got to pick your own chief of staff. Turns out you don't, because the White House placed Matthew Whitaker in there as the chief of staff, and then the president picked him to be the acting Attorney General, which turns out that may be a violation of the Constitution.
because he didn't go through a confirmation process.
He's never been through a confirmation process. That's right. Has not been confirmed by the Senate. So we'll see what happens with that. And the president immediately started backing off of the guy.
I think, as The Onion once put it, that Donald Trump's be able to pull us off because of a little loophole in the Constitution called the "No one will stop me" clause.
That's right. I saw that
But
same
Chris
article.
Christie this morning on ABC was talking about Whitaker, and he had this quote that I think a lot of people are pointing at. I think he's really there to land the Mueller investigation, to get it done. What the president's attempting to do here is to have someone who's already been involved to get the Mueller investigation to its completion. It seems kind of odd to come out and say you're appointing someone to end the investigation. Didn't we do this? Wasn't this what triggered the investigation at the very beginning? Are we going to have an investigation on top of the investigation as we do this again and again?
Right.
It's one of those moments, history repeats itself, first as tragedy, then as farce.
This
Well,
guy.
then if he does that, if that's what the whole plan is and that's what he ends up doing, then do some of those senators finally grow a pair? And
No. Republicans are going to stand by themselves. I mean, you don't have any equivalent of Joe Lieberman up there who's going to, impeach someone from their own party, because Republicans don't act like that.
But that will give the House in January the right
The
to
goods.
open up any investigation they want. If Whitaker stands in the way of Mueller finishing this thing, that's the end of it. I mean, they've got to open up everything they can on that. They don't have any choice. And Whitaker, the way Whitaker got this job was by going on the talk show circuit and speaking out against the Mueller investigation. That's how he got noticed by the president. People were telling him, if you want to get noticed by the president, go on the Fox News and these other talk shows and speak out. And that's how the president noticed him, and that's why he was placed there. Matter of fact, it turns out that he was interviewed by the White House for a job to be the hatchet man for the White House against Robert Mueller.
Well, you know who I think has really been a beacon of integrity in this whole thing is Lindsey Graham. I'm really, really, really proud of him and the way he said that all hell would break loose if Donald Trump did this. And apparently we all misunderstood and backtrack. But no, this is really incredible. But I do think that this might open up a big old can of worms.
I tell you what, there is nothing on this God's green earth that can make me defend Jeff Sessions. He can go straight to shit. Fuck him. But honestly, I just feel like if Mueller has something, it will out. If he doesn't, let's just move on and deal with the business at hand. I honestly don't.
Isn't he about ready to release results anyway?
Well, he's writing writing his report, which indicates to me that he's not about to indict anybody. If he's writing a final report, he's not about to go to a grand jury. And that's stunning to me.
We've been hearing rumors like this for months and months.
Yeah.
Who knows if he's actually writing something or anything. I think
That's
one of the
true.
things that Democrats did really well over the past election is keeping their focus on the immediate material issues that affect people's lives, notably health care, the cost of pharmaceuticals, infrastructure investment, that kind of thing. And they kind of let the Mueller investigation roll on its own, and it gives enough to the Democratic base who really wants to see this happen. Meanwhile, other people who frankly couldn't care less hear the message that government can work to help them.
Right.
I think this goes back to what we were saying at the beginning, that you can do these investigations while pushing those solid bills. And by focusing on Mueller investigation, while focusing on the Attorney General appointment, let the talking heads do that. Let investigations along the side do that. If you pass out a bill that's going to lower pharmaceutical costs and put it on the Senate and put it on the president to pass those things, I think that's going to get people a whole lot more excited.
If Whitaker focuses on shutting down the Mueller investigation and lets the states that have legalized marijuana do their thing, and lets people who are interested in criminal justice reform do their thing, that's fine. I'm okay with that. I think that Jeff Sessions is a horrible old Confederacy racist, and the sooner he exits stage left, the better. And good riddance.
I can't wait to read his book, though. He's got to be so miffed at Trump. I left my job in the Senate that I could have had the rest of my life to support you, you prick.
Well, you know what?
What you did to me.
So children, do the right thing.
Yeah.
This is what happens when you follow a guy with no scruples and no morals, can't tell the truth. You follow him and you think somehow you're going to, get what you want. You're not. So Jeff Sessions is getting just what he deserves.
There's no question about that.
So long.
There's no question about that.
No legacy.
And I think
you're nobody.
His seat just won by a Democrat? Wasn't Jeff Sessions' seat just won by a Democrat?
Doug Ford.
Yeah, that's right. Doug Ford won that seat. Well, this is going to
Doug Jones.
Doug Jones.
Ford
Thank you. Yeah, Doug Jones. That's what I was. Yeah. So we'll see how this thing plays out. But I don't see how Whitaker hangs on. The president is backing away from him. If he backs up any harder, he's going to trip over his own feet. He's backing up so hard on this because it looks like this appointment was unconstitutional. Clarence Thomas issued an opinion last year on an appointment pretty similar to this, where he said that it was unconstitutional, and recognize the serious risk for abuse and corruption posed by permitting one person to fill every office in government. Uh-oh. So we'll see how this plays out, but I don't see how Whitaker hangs on to this too much longer. And if he does what I expect him to do and shuts down this Mueller investigation, it's going to be a big constitutional crisis. And like you said, Chris Bell, we'll see if the Republicans grow a pair on that. I don't think they will. I think they'll continue to placate the president on this.
I don't think it's necessarily even placating the president. The point of politics is to get what you want out of it. If Republicans are getting what they want, then why should they be frustrated with the president doing this?
Well, are they getting what they want? I mean, they did get the Senate, but they lost the House. Surely some of the stink can't be avoided.
The point of politics isn't to get those seats. It's to accomplish your goals. It's to distribute resources. And they got the tax cut, which is what they wanted. They got these judgeships in place, which will be able to enact a counter-majoritarian agenda for decades to come. Democrats could take the House and the Senate and pass every Bernie Sanders bill they want, but if it keeps on getting smacked down by the courts, then they're going to have to get a constitutional amendment in place. Yeah. I mean, this is something that's going to have decades-long consequences for the benefit of Republicans, and Donald Trump made it happen. Why would they want to get Donald Trump out of there?
Well, you answered a question that's sort of been, buzzing around in the back of my mind. Why are Democrats not happier about flipping the House, right? It's not the end all and be all. But I tell you what, if we had not flipped the House, it would have been the end of two-party democracy in this country.
Well, the Senate is the better chamber to have won, but that was almost impossible.
Well,
with the Senate
and
map,
that is a very legitimate point, because and something that we've talked about on the show, that the damage that he's doing is not going to be easily undone. So I think that's fully legitimate, but it's also, I think, a lot of the support from Republican politicians for Donald Trump came from the fact that they were scared to death that he'd unleash his base. And he continued to do that. He still was crowing about it the day after the election. Those that didn't show him enough love, got beat. And,
I've never seen anything like that.
Saying all that. And so, but does that hold? It may. I mean, he may continue to be Teflon with all those folks, or he could start to slip because of something like a constitutional crisis. And if he does, they'll do what politicians do and run for the hills, I would think. But we'll see.
Or they could defend him. They could say that Democrats are wrong on this. We're going to defend our president. The Constitution only has power to the extent to which you can actually enforce it.
Right.
That's something that Andrew Jackson would point out. So you've got to wonder, what happens if it comes to that. I think that a lot of Democrats out there, a lot of Americans overall, need to be thinking about what is the point of government. What does it do? What is its purpose? And why do people vote for different politicians? There are a lot of people out there voting for Beto O'Rourke. But if Beto had won, how would their lives be better? Would their Social Security checks be bigger? Would their paychecks be bigger? Would their lives be filled with fruit and candy? I don't think so. People vote for certain politicians because you have this visceral sense of being on a team and you want to win. And for a long time, Democrats did a good job of appealing to people's immediate material interest. You vote for FDR and you're going to be able to retire. You're going to have health care, that kind of thing. Right now, I don't see any politicians appealing to people's sense of pocketbook like that, except for the extremely wealthy with Republicans. If the Republican's going to get elected, you're going to have a whole lot more money if you're very, very rich. Everyone else just kind of is fighting amongst themselves in the sense of, well, I'm on Team Red or I'm on Team Blue, and no matter who gets elected, your life is probably going to be the same. And I think it's a depressing fact of politics. And I think it's why Donald Trump almost got elected in the first place.
And I think that goes back to what we've been talking about on this podcast for a long time. The Democrats have had a very hard time putting out that message about, if you elect us, how is your life going to be better? We are not good at that. And I think
we couldn't even sell health care.
Because the health care bill sucks.
Which is something that people
first time
want.
around, we couldn't sell health care.
No, but I think it's because it comes back to the base. The Democrats, on one hand, want to appeal to the highly educated, I'm going to use a term I hate here, but cultural elites who live in New York who are wealthy. You don't want to piss off Wall Street because that's where a lot of money comes from. But also you're trying to appeal to poor people and provide them stuff. And it's kind of hard to tell a story where there is a good guy, that's you, the working class American, and a bad guy. And if you elected us, we're going to hurt the bad guy and reward the good guy because you're trying to make both people happy. But the Democratic Party is split into two major philosophical strands. You have the people who say, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, that we should not discriminate against people, we should not react recklessly, that we're all in this together. But there's another FDR quote the Democrats used to be great at that they don't really think about anymore, and that is, they hate me and I welcome their hatred. FDR was loathed by the banks. He was loathed by Wall Street because he pointed out that they were the problem in America at the time, that they led to this big financial crisis. And Democrats couldn't say that after our most recent financial crisis, and they can't say it now. Donald Trump can. He says it. He doesn't actually enact policy on it,
right?
But he says it. And so how can you say that we're going to represent the working class Americans, we're going to provide something for you, if you can't tell a story that points out who the bad guy is?
And that's been the problem for the Democratic Party for a very long time, when they realized that they could start raising money from big business. And as you know,
how do you have big tent politics when you don't have anybody to be a bad guy?
Well, the union folks and labor had been in sync with the Democratic Party on social issues for a long time, but they would continue to vote Democratic for exactly what Evan was saying, that they would protect their pocketbook. And then when they woke up and said, you're not going to protect our pocketbook anymore, you're doing exactly what the Republicans are, well, screw you. We never agreed with you on social issues, so we'll just go vote with the Republican Party now. Mm-hmm. I think that's interesting, though, because I don't disagree with you as far as Wall Street goes and how they've sucked up. But now two very good politicians, Barack Obama and Beto O'Rourke, have demonstrated how you can give the party the finger and raise a shitload of money in small dollars. And if we can institutionalize that in the Democratic Party, and I don't think that it's any big coincidence that right after Barack Obama's success, suddenly here comes Citizens United that screws the system up so badly that it'll probably never be repaired. But if we can prove that you can raise money in smaller increments and still be very competitive, that really does change the playing field rather dramatically, because you don't have to suck up to those folks anymore.
What did Barack Obama do when he finally got power? He had a supermajority up there. He could have done anything. So did he institute card check to reward the unions and strengthen his base? No, he didn't do that. Did he raise the minimum wage across the board to help working class Americans? No, he didn't do that. Did he increase the size of Social Security checks or implement new policies on Wall Street to make sure that a financial crisis would not happen again? Not really. Those have all been rolled back. So what's the point of power if you're not going to do anything with it? What if Beto O'Rourke
Andy, you're going to let him talk that way
No,
about Barack
I am
Obama?
not. Shut your mouth. Barack Obama passed a health care bill, and look, he used
passed a health insurance bill that was a giveaway to health insurance companies.
Well, you know what? But a lot of the number of uninsured people in this country is a lot lower now than it was before the Affordable Care Act. But my question to you is, can the socialists do it better? Are the socialists better at this? As far as what you were talking about, the question that was on the table a little bit earlier about lost my train of thought.
I don't think these policies are necessarily socialist, and it's something that Elizabeth Warren has talked about pretty clearly. People ask, "Are you a socialist?" in contrast to Bernie Sanders. He says, "No. At my core, I am not a socialist. I'm a capitalist because I believe in the market. I believe that it can work." And so you can come up with policies that work within a marketplace, but I don't think you have to be a socialist to point out that there are certain institutions that don't work well within a market because these are not fungible goods. These are not goods that people can research.
No, my point is like the big, the wealthy versus the poor. How can you appeal to the poor if you also have to, appeal to the wealthy? Mm-hmm. Are socialists better at this?
What do you mean?
Well,
are they better at appealing to the poor?
Well, yeah. I mean, my thing is, I think what's brilliant about the Democrats is that we do understand that we want to make America better for everybody, and we're trying to find a way to make America better for everybody within a capitalist system. What we don't know how to do is message. We don't know how to boil down what we want to do into talking points that people can remember and can understand and can take to heart, no matter where you fall in our Big Ten.
So I also think the Democrats don't do a good job of making things better for everybody. I can look back at the economic trends.
We do a lot better
years.
than the Republicans do.
Republicans deliver for their base
and their base is a super narrow
because
slice.
It's a twofold thing. You can say, I'm going to make your life better, and I'm going to make the lives of your enemies worse. And even if they don't do the first half, they do the second half pretty well. Democrats don't do either.
Well, wait a minute. Republicans have the advantage that they have a slice of their base doesn't really will vote against their self-interest every time, as long as it hurts these other people that they don't like. I don't think it's condescending at all. I think that's the reality on the ground.
People have values that are discrete from their economic interests. I mean,
and if their value is if their values are misogyny and racism, then
their values are tradition. Their values are families.
And what does tradition mean?
I don't
racism.
know.
All right.
When you start talking about the good old days for whom? Right? When you start talking about traditional American values, what are we talking about? We're not talking about a world where I, who am black, my dad, who is black, where we fared well. So traditional American values is code for we're better, at least we're better than the black folk. Okay, so if you have a portion of your base who is willing to vote against their own economic self-interest so that they can maintain their privilege, and the Democrats, on the other hand, are saying, look, we want to represent everyone. We just don't know how to tell everybody that in a way that fits on a bumper sticker.
The messaging point is really, I'm glad you brought it up because, Evan, you'll remember when the health care bill first came out, and maybe, I don't know if you were over the Chronicle then or not, but it was...
I was in college.
But it was so irritating to see that there were so many points that were being offered through the Affordable Care Act that were polling at above 80, somewhere around 70 to 80%, but they couldn't put together a message to sell it.
Are you talking about during the Clinton administration
or
Obama?
With Obama
administration.
Because same thing.
The Affordable
Care
Act.
Right, so hang on.
How can you not put together a selling message or a message that sells when you have that much material to work with? It just didn't make any sense.
We're out of time on this, but I'll just wrap this up with it. The problem, Evan, that you were talking about with Obama in his first 2 years with the supermajority was he tried to be everybody's president. He tried to work with the Republicans as opposed to what Donald Trump's doing and saying, to hell with you. I'm going to do it my way. I'm going to jam everything down your throat, and I don't care what you think. And President Obama said, I want to work with the Republicans, and he allowed them to delay everything he wanted to do for the 2 years while he had the supermajority supermajority. Then he lost it in the midterm election, and everything was gone.
Right.
That was the problem that President Obama had. He tried to be presidential instead of doing what President Trump's doing, and that was his mistake. Instead of jamming everything down their throats.
I
don't
don't.
have to jam
I
it down
don't.
throats. You have a referendum. You have a supermajority. Clearly, the American people want what you have to offer. They don't want what Republicans have to offer at the time. And so you can just pass a lot of the bills that you want. You could pass all of these very popular policies, as we were talking about before.
Right.
Democratic policy is popular. Democrats themselves aren't.
He may have been
chose
somewhat cognizant of the fact that he was the first African American president, though, too.
All right,
and it might be a little bit of a line to walk.
Let's
Agreed.
move on. We've got just a couple minutes to do this last topic. A few rounds with Jim Acosta and what can only be called a very testy and attacking post-election press conference the other day. President Trump called Acosta a rude, terrible person as he tried to ask the president a question. The exchange came during the White House press conference on the 2018 midterm election in which Trump called out failed Republican candidates who did not embrace him. Trump began taking questions and called on Acosta, who tried to ask the president about his characterization of the migrant caravan, roughly 4,000 Central American immigrants coming there. And Trump said, "Here we go," to Acosta. When he tried to ask him about using the word invasion, he told him to put the mic down and sit down. A White House staffer came over to everybody's seen it, tried to take the mic from him, and it went downhill from there.
Well, after hearing a conversation on NPR, I guess it was on Friday, that pretty much told the whole story. And someone pointed out that the president does not have to call on Jim Acosta at that briefing, but he does because it plays so well to his base.
That's right.
They hate him and they love
He wants it.
the back and forth. And so Acosta played right into his hands. And we've talked about this on this show before, that he needs to stop trying to be part of the story.
Sarah Sanders later in that day tweeted out what has been shown to be a altered video, and then they revoked his press pass.
Yeah, I'm going to say it again. We're not covering this White House the right way. We're learning. Well, we're not. I don't know if we're learning or not. We cannot cover the president's Twitter feed. We can't let the president.
Well, this wasn't his Twitter feed.
No, I understand. What I'm saying is we can't let the president, whatever the most dramatic thing that happens during the day, is not where we need to focus.
But
Quit being distracted by these shiny things that the president dangles. Jim Acosta, let him do his thing. Stop paying attention to that. Let's cover government. Let's cover what government is doing. Let's cover what the Congress is doing.
Well, don't you think President Trump called on Jim Acosta to have
Absolutely.
that moment?
Yes.
To create that controversy?
Yes. And the thing about it is, I would sit at my desk in the newsroom, and CNN is playing on a giant screen way far off in the distance where I can see, kind of see what's happening. And it's the same thing happening over and over and over again. And if I had been in the newsroom on the day of this Jim Acosta thing, I would have just seen that video over and over and over again when there are 1,000 other things going on. We need to figure out how to cover the news in a way that is not just repeating whatever the most.
I mean, they're off talking to people. They're off talking to sources. Very little news is going to be made in those briefings, but they're almost required to be there in case something happens. But
then some news. Okay, some news, quote unquote, is made because something happened.
Because something stupid with a reporter.
So we play the video. So let's show the video. Now let's have the talking heads talking about the video. Now let's show the video again. Now let's have a different set of talking heads talk about the video. Now let's have somebody analyze the video.
We're running out of time, so I want to bring up April Ryan and what's the other one's name? Abby Phillip. The president attacked both of them, female African American reporters. April Ryan asked him a question, and then he attacked her. And the next day, when somebody asked him about it, so you talk about somebody that's a loser. She doesn't know what the hell she's doing. And when she asked him a question, Abby Phillip the next day asked him a question, and he looked right at her and said, "What a stupid question that is. What a stupid question.
Why are
I
we
watch
talking
you a
about
lot.
This?
What a stupid question that is."
Why are we even talking about this?
Hang on a minute. He attacks African American female reporters when they ask him a tough question that he doesn't want to answer.
Who gives a damn? Really?
Really?
Really? Honestly, okay, look, we know he doesn't like April Ryan. We know he doesn't like black people. We know that if whatever he does in that press briefing, that is out of the ordinary. That's what the media is going to focus on. Let's stop focusing on that. I mean, really, how many people's lives does it affect if he calls April Ryan an idiot? Nobody. Not me. That doesn't help my kids. That doesn't help your kids. That doesn't help,
I'm
that doesn't
stunned.
do anything
I'm
about
I know how
climate
to correct
change.
this, though. If someone will just point out to Donald Trump that is not presidential to act that way.
Oh, yeah.
I think that.
Yeah,
I'm stunned that
That'll clean
I'm
it up.
stunned at your response
because
to that.
I'm not going to get drawn into this crazy. It's like arguing with a toddler. You're wasting your time.
Right.
We live in a society of the spectacle.
Yes. Oh my gosh, what a great word.
Yeah.
It is a spectacle, and we're covering the spectacle, and we need to stop doing that.
All right. Well, then we'll leave it right there. Let's move into out of left field. Who wants to go first?
Well, Evan said something earlier that struck a chord with me about people getting involved because they want to be part of a team. And I think that's true, and they want to win. But one thing that has really concerned me in recent elections when I've seen more young people get involved on the volunteering side is that if their candidate doesn't win, they tend to then be gone, and the disappointment from losing the election sends them away. People need to remember that politics is the one game that you can play your entire adult life, even after you can't swing a golf club anymore or swing a tennis racket. You can still participate in politics, and it's not just a game. Obviously, it's extraordinarily meaningful, or it can be extraordinarily meaningful at times. And when I spoke to groups of volunteers during this cycle, when candidates would ask me to come over and do so, I would always try to make that point. Remember, it's not just about, this is part of the process. To have these campaigns, to have ideas put on the table, to have the debates and the different positions. That's how our government works. And if it doesn't turn out your way, I don't want to see people go away. And I'm mainly focused on the Beto factor because obviously throngs of young people were attracted to that race, and well, they should have been. But now they need to stay involved because there are going to be a lot more races in the future and a lot more that they can do. And that's my out of left field.
My out of left field, basically, I would like to just agree with you, Chris Bell. I tell you what, it's kind of heartbreaking. Every time I heard somebody say who was in their 20s or 30s that, well, they didn't vote, but you just want to shake them. But it's just like with your kids. You think, well, my kids aren't going to make all the same mistakes that I made because I'm going to tell them, what not to do. And then, they're not going to have to make that mistake because I informed them and now they know better. Well, that doesn't work. And you can tell young people, look, you've got to vote. It's so important. You've got to vote. This is your future. It's so... but if it's not real to them, they're not going to do it. Here's the thing. I think that there are so many young people today have so many things that they are dealing with. Their student debt, their inability to buy, to think that they could ever, get married and have a family and buy a house and have a life, the kinds of things that we took for granted, that there was sort of this progression. They don't feel, I think, that government is working for them. So if we could stop focusing on what Donald Trump said in a press conference or tweeted out, and we could just talk about climate change and what climate change is going to mean to all of us in the coming decade or two in terms of mass migration, starvation, war. It's not just about species extinction and the world getting hotter. It is about your life is going to be turned upside down. That might grab younger people enough to make them feel like I've got to do something about this, and I'm going to start with voting.
Evan, go ahead.
I guess my out of left is I actually want to go to the left. We've been talking about a lot of sort of centrist Democrat things going on in the last election here in Harris County. 3 socialists actually won their races. Franklin Bynum at misdemeanor court number 8, Dacene Jones at the 180th Criminal District Court, and Danny Norris for the Harris County Department of Education. Actual socialists, actual leftists won elections, and I am very curious to see how this goes. We've seen some Tea Party folks getting office and seen what they can do. What's going to happen with the left in power for the first time in decades? I don't know.
It's going to be interesting.
So my out of left field is 2 years ago, the Republican Party in Texas, who's had a stronghold in Texas for a very long time, passed a law banning the straight party ticket voting here in Texas. But they outsmarted themselves because they banned it effective 2020, and they left it in place for this election in 2018 because historically the Republicans have done very well in midterm elections, and they expected that they would do very well in 2018. And they outsmarted themselves because they didn't expect Donald Trump to be as bad as he is, and they didn't expect Beto O'Rourke to be as strong as he was, and they didn't expect the surge to be the way it was. And here in Harris County, Houston, Texas, where we're recording, every Republican lost. And there was a surge in other cities in Texas, and the Republicans outsmarted themselves. And what they thought they were doing, where they would take all the seats in the local and governments, and where they thought they would get a stronger lock in the Texas legislature, they lost some of their standing in the legislature, and they lost most of their all of their hold in the government here in Harris County and some of the other governments. You outsmarted yourselves because you were playing politics. We'll see what happens in the next election. That's my out of left field. And that's all the time we have this week. Much thanks to Evan Mintz for joining us today. Thank you very much. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and please rate us on iTunes. More important than that, we need you to do what, Andy? Subscribe, please. It's all about subscriptions. Go to Libsyn or your favorite podcasting site and subscribe to What's Left America. Much thanks to Vertical Ascension Entertainment for recording us and putting us up on YouTube, and to Keegan DeLeo, our in-studio producer. Have a great week.